I'm here with our 4 recipients of this year's President's Awards for Distinguished Scholar Teachers. And let me begin by offering my congratulations. These faculty were nominated by members of our community for their remarkable contribution to Georgetown and to the Academy as scholars and teachers. We've brought them together in a virtual roundtable to hear more about their commitment to research and learning. So Paul, Rachel, Ken, and Alison, thank you for being here. And let's just jump right in. Let me ask you, how do you define a scholar teacher? Why is it important to be committed to both roles?
This is a funny way to define it, but I think from the perspective of Georgetown College, I think of the scholar teacher as the default setting. I mean, I feel like the college is a place that has expectations for teaching the way you find at a small liberal arts college, and the expectations for scholarship are those at the finest research universities. And so I think this is sort of the norm of daily practice at the college. But when I think about what that looks like, it's not just a commitment to scholarship, a commitment to teaching. What is exciting to me about what happens at Georgetown is the way that, at least for my own work, they are intertwined. I mean, when you start your career, you don't know what you're doing. You think you know a little, you know nothing. And then a career unfolds and all kinds of unexpected things happen. And for me, I think one of those unexpected things was that I ended up writing books for the undergraduate classroom that came out of my research. And then I also wrote a book that came out of a class I had developed at Georgetown. So I've seen those intersections in ways that were really fruitful, and that meant that I could never anticipate what would happen in any class I taught, because I just knew that there'd be all kinds of fertile opportunities for the teaching and the scholarship to feed each other in ways I couldn't imagine. So when I think about what it means to be a scholar teacher, I actually think about that intersection of the different enterprises, and especially how that intersection works at a campus like ours.
And Paul, so is it a little different at the Law Center? How do you define scholar teacher?
Oh, it's different for me. It's more personal in a way. I'm a Black man who gets paid to think. My great-grandfather cleaned outhouses for a living. He literally cleaned other people's shit. And that was honorable work. But my mother often says, what would the ancestors say if they could see my generation now? So the scholarship is about taking the responsibility seriously. There's an African proverb, the poet who is not in trouble with the king is in trouble with her work. And I think the same way about my scholarship. If it's not upsetting somebody or something, I need to readjust. And I'll tell you, I thought that teaching was going to be a way of giving back, of kind of lifting as I climb. Man, I was wrong about that. I get so much more than I give from my students.
Thank you. Rachel, how do you understand the term scholar teacher?
Well, I was just thinking back to my original training, and so I was trained as both a developmental scientist and as a clinical psychologist. And as the clinician, you do the research practitioner model. And so I think of the teacher scholar model as an application of that, in that you bring your practice can only be informed as the new knowledge comes along. We want to be the most up-to-date and the most current, so that as we're building knowledge in scholarship, we're also building that knowledge in the education realm. And I think I want to echo, though, what both Alison and Paul said. The relationship is so bi-directional. It is really, it's an absolutely two-way street between teaching and research. So within my lab, the Early Learning Project, we absolutely collaborate and work together as a team at all moments. And it started right from my first semester when I was able to recruit a student who has gone on to be a top forensic psychologist. It just has always, right from the very beginning, the excitement that it comes from just working together in a lab with students is what my definition probably is of the scholar teacher model. And then when you go into the classroom and this excitement that students have to say, oh, this is research that's going on at Georgetown. And say, yeah, this is going on at Georgetown. Have you heard about the research that so-and-so is doing? So it's just such a lovely bi-directional synergistic experience is probably how I would define the teacher-scholar model.
Thank you very much. And Ken, share with us, what does the phrase scholar teacher mean for you?
It's critical in what we do at the medical center. This is a research university, and when we teach, we have to inform our teaching with the research, not only in our own labs, but we have to keep up with what's going on in our field and adjacent fields so that we can, in fact, keep our research fresh, but also it informs our teaching. I once had a medical student who said, why can't we just learn the facts, just a long list of facts? And I said, because those facts will not be facts by the time you graduate. Why is that? He said, because research changes facts. So there is more than one universe of facts that we have to deal with, at least in a research university.
And Ken, what have you found to be the best way to engage students in your research?
Well, of course, in the lecture format that we use at the medical school, it's difficult unless a student is particularly interested in a subject, either in my lab or someone else's lab. With graduate students, of course, they gravitate to labs that they are interested in. And there, it's doing. When they get into the lab and they see what's going on and they give it a try themselves, you can see the fire lighting up. And in fact, I've told many students that what really happens when they have their first successful experiment, and I say to them, no one's ever known that before, that really turns them on.
Sure. Rachel, you described a moment ago the excitement of finding that synergy between what goes on in the laboratory and then in your classroom. What have you found to be the best way to engage students in your research?
Well, really, I would echo what Ken just said, and that once students get involved, so it can be at multiple different levels. So reading a textbook and they make connections between what they see in the world and what's in the research. But within the lab setting, it really is when they do stuff. And I'm going to say something sort of funny here. In my lab, every time we get reliable on a coding scheme, it's a big celebration, right? So that we've found a concept, we've defined a concept, people are agreeing on it, and we're producing new knowledge about this field, about how children are developing and engaging with the world. And so it is each one of those small victories, seeing that process, and then eventually obviously seeing publications and conference presentations, all these very tangible things, but it's also sort of celebrating each of the milestones that students gain as they engage in the research process every step of the way.
Well, thank you. And Alison and Paul, research is a little bit different in your context. Share with us what it's like in history, and then we'll go to Paul and talk about research in the Law Center context.
Yeah, really, it's striking to me hearing Ken and Rachel talk about their lab experiences, because I think I would say that I don't bring students into my own research. I've tried to have students do small projects connected to my work, but they can't read the handwriting for the materials that I look at, and a lot of my research has been archive based. So I think what I would say is that it's much more important to me to introduce students to a culture of research in which they're doing their own research. And of course, in history, they can start doing that their very first week at Georgetown as first-year students. I can have them read primary sources, and we can talk about them that very first week, and they can think about how to frame questions, and they start that process of thinking about what it means to be a researcher right away. And of course, students continue in research in more serious ways all the way through their careers. But what I try to emphasize to students once they start having the chance to do longer, whether semester papers or year-long senior theses, or of course, master's and doctoral theses as well, is that being part of a community of scholars is being part of a conversation, and that research is always about engaging with others. So even if what historians do might seem quite solitary in many ways, in terms of some of the research, producing scholarship is a collegial and collective enterprise in which you're always interacting with others, whether sharing your findings, sharing preliminary drafts. Just this semester, I'm finishing the year-long senior thesis seminar for the history students. And they have the most amazing pieces of original scholarship that they've generated over the course of this year. And of course, over the course of a year when they can't get to any archives, they're having to do everything on their computers, which is, kind of excruciating, but they've done it and their work is amazing. So I think what I try to get the students to do is to get excited about their own research, but to understand that research is collective and collaborative at every stage, even when you seem to be sitting alone in front of your computer looking for sources.
Thank you. And Paul, place research in the context of the Law Center.
So, Jack, you know that I teach big doctrinal classes at the law school, criminal law, criminal procedure, which is the law of the police. In my scholarship, I express very strong views. And I have some concerns about bringing those views into the classroom because I really want all of the students to feel free to express themselves. In law school, a lot of us use the Socratic method, so it's actually the students who do more talking than I do. And I find that dynamic in the class. The students feel free to say a whole bunch of stuff, some of which I agree with and some of which I don't. But to me, that's the mark of a successful class. So it's during office hours or conversations with my research assistants that the work, the scholarship comes up. And sometimes with students, I don't know if guinea pigs is the right word, Jack, don't get concerned. It's not like experiments on human subjects that I have to get a permission to do, but we've got brilliant people, brilliant students at the law school, many of whom are young folks, and some of what they think is relevant to my work. One example, I wrote a book about hip hop and criminal law. And one of my ideas was that the consumers of hip hop, 70% of whom are white, would probably have different feelings about the criminal legal process than people who don't listen to hip hop. And so a lot of our students are fans of hip hop. So I had those kinds of conversations with them. It really improved the book.
Thank you. A moment ago, Ken emphasized that we are a research university. And Rachel, you mentioned a moment ago, just that sheer joy of celebration when you've accomplished something in your lab. And we're the beneficiaries that we live in a community that cherishes the practice of research. So for a researcher, share with us, what's the best moment when you're engaged in the work of research? Rachel, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, and I was trying to answer this, and when it's just the best moment, I think there are it's all about the process, right? So there's these multiple best moments. So the piece I really enjoy, and this really follows from what Alison and Paul were saying too, was this joy of the discussion and the conversation as you come up with the idea. How are we going to solve this problem? How can we design this study to really address the question that we have? What methods are we going to use? And, graduate students will come in and say, well, we really should be thinking about this new statistical approach. Or I've had graduate students come in and say, look, I'm really interested in, so for example, Natalie Brito came in and at the beginning of her training, she said, I'm really interested in bilingualism. And I had never done any studies on that before, but I was really interested in memory flexibility. And so over the course of her training, we started to ask, would bilingual babies be more flexible in their memory processing? She went on, she's still studying this. I went on and I got additional grants to really explore this because it was an open question. But that is the joy, I think, of working in this field of research, where you generate this whole new idea, you get to explore it, you work with other people, and you problem solve. There's a lot of challenges along the way, obviously, but the joy of it is deciding on that new idea and then following it through to find out, well, what was the answer?
Thank you. And Ken, what resonates for you when you realize this life that you've committed yourself to is all worth it? What's the best moment for a researcher?
So among the best moments are being able to turn someone on to discovery. There's something special in the research field where you're seeing results and data that you can put together that is brand new information never known before. And to be able to convey that, to your colleagues and especially to the students who do that, whether they're undergraduates or medical students or graduate students. And the second related area is when a student comes to me and says, I really screwed up. I made a mistake. And I say, well, let's talk about that. We don't want to spend a week understanding the mistake, but we want to know what happened. And they tell me what they did, and we go through it and we find the mistake. And we say, well, we made this one 10 years ago, and we made it, maybe 20 years ago too. So this is not new, so you don't get a reward. But try again, and the next mistake maybe will be a new one, in which case we open a bottle of wine. So mistakes are important in research, and to convey that especially to an undergraduate, a Georgetown undergraduate, who are just outstanding students. And they think that research is straightforward and mistakes are disastrous. They're often not disastrous. They're often what you learn from. But we love to see new mistakes. We tell them, I've been in this business a long time. We've seen that mistake a couple of times before. No, so you don't get a bottle of wine.
And Alison, the practice of research in history includes digging into archives and delivering papers to some of our colleagues. Where on the continuum do you find the greatest joy?
Well, I love going to archives. I just love sitting in libraries and working my way through manuscripts that often other people have looked at them too, but they aren't asking the questions I'm asking, or they haven't looked at them in decades. So when I think of some of the greatest kinds of moments, they're the kinds of moments when I want to get out of my chair and find someone to tell that I have found something, even though that no one will care, but I'm very excited about what I found. There have been times when I've gotten an archivist to come and look at what I found. And so sometimes it's a source that challenges everything you thought was going on. It's very gratifying to find a source that confirms what you think. You say, yeah, I was right. But it's much more exciting to find one that really raises a whole new set of problems and questions. It makes me think of Ken's point about the mistakes. It's not so much that it's a mistake, but it's a challenge. You have to really kind of rethink what you thought was going on because of this new source. So that's one kind of exciting research moment. And the other, maybe this is particular to historians, but is handling an object that you've read about and seen described and then actually holding it. So I just finished this book on a conspiracy that took place in what is now Indonesia in 1623. And before he was executed for his role in this conspiracy, one of the accused men, who was a man who worked for the English East India Company, got a hold of the East India Company's prayer book. It was a book of Psalms, which had a number of blank pages. And in these blank pages, he wrote an account of his innocence and how they had all been framed by the Dutch. And the accusation of conspiracy wasn't true. And so this appears in multiple pages in this prayer book. And I had read in a 17th century transcription of what he said. But the book itself still exists. It's in the archives in The Hague. It was sent over as evidence after the conspiracy trial as part of this sort of diplomatic crisis for the English and the Dutch. And it's still sitting in the National Archives in The Hague. And I was so excited when I found this book. And of course, the whole thing could have been a forgery, but it was still really exciting to see it and to see the way the man's handwriting. He signed his name on multiple pages. He described how he was unjustly tortured, and he confessed to things that he knew weren't true. So it's really powerful when you handle objects like that somebody created at moments of profound duress. And it's sort of this visceral connection with the past. So I think it's an unusual thing when it happens to see something that has been described that is so important as a piece of evidence, and then there it is in the archives, still in a special collection of evidence sent in 1628 from England to the Netherlands.
And Paul, share with us in your context, from the moment where you've conceived an idea to when ultimately you see it in print somewhere, where in the journey, what's the best moment for you?
So my story is kind of like Alison's. it's when the work resonates in a way that you hadn't expected, but love. So I wrote another book called Chokehold: Policing Black Men. And I have a chapter where I talk about stop and frisk as a form of sexual harassment. And one of the things I respect so much about our university is our involvement with and commitment to people who are behind bars. And Jack, I know we have some really good news on that front recently, that we're going to be granting degrees. Am I right?
That's right.
Yes, that's so important and so wonderful. So thank you for your leadership on that. And thanks to your leadership and Dean Trainer's leadership and the law school, we've been involved in local prisons for a while. And so my wonderful colleague, Allegra McLeod, was working with a group of inmates at Jessup State Prison in Maryland. And she asked me to present chapters of my book, which was then a work in progress, to a reading group there. And the chapter that I was most nervous about them reading was the one about stop and frisk, and whether and how that is experienced by many as a form of sexual harassment. And that's the chapter that they liked the best. That's the one that they said reflected their own experience. And they've never been able to quite think of it in the way that I had described it, but it meant something to them. Man, I felt like my work was done.
Rachel, did you want to add something to what's been said about the joy of research?
I did. And so I was just very struck by, again, another commonality of when you actually see something happen. So you literally see a baby remember an action, but then really the key is how do we sort of disseminate that information so that it becomes useful to families. So I've had a really great luck in being able to collaborate with 0 to 3 and other and Sesame Workshop and other groups to share information about what we've found with parents so that they can actually use it. So we have these screen sense materials. And especially the reason I sort of thought about this is especially during this time when we're all Zooming with one another, the fact that we had done research on video chat ahead of the pandemic then became helpful in terms of tips for families to connect. And then I was able to talk with a number of different groups who were connecting foster parents and biological parents during the pandemic and figuring out a way that they could stay connected via Zoom. We also did a research book called Zoomers and Boomers, where we were looking at grandparents and how they were staying connected during the pandemic as well. So I think there's this piece of how does it really matter in the real world, and having, again, partners who you can share so that that information gets to families and they can actually use this amazing science that is being built at the university. I think that's the other great piece of joy and an important piece.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, each of you have such a strong commitment to the work of our university, and each of you are so deeply appreciated and valued by your colleagues. Let me ask you, what does it mean to receive this recognition? Ken?
Well, for me, it was a wonderful honor because I've spent my entire adult career at Georgetown, and I have so many fond memories. And one of them is my first day at Georgetown, thinking, am I going to succeed here? This is a place that with very many talented people in many, many areas. And I was just coming in as a brand new assistant professor, really out of my waters. I was coming from California at the time, even though I was familiar with this area, having grown up in Baltimore, but I was coming from California and everything looked so different. And I said, this is going to be a real challenge. And as it turned out, it was a nurturing place. My colleagues were nurturing. And then to reach this point where I think I can say to my family that somebody must have appreciated what I did. And that's what it means so much to me. It's a great honor, and I'm very, very happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Ken. Alison?
It's so profoundly meaningful. I mean, I think especially this year, I feel like we've all been in the COVID doldrums, for a while, and to get this news, this incredible news, has just been the most delightful and flattering moment. But when I think about what it means, I also find myself thinking about the way Ken described what it means to him, that it means a lot because this recognition is something that comes at Georgetown, Georgetown's idea of the scholar teacher that has shaped the kinds of work that all of us do. And I think about how important my time in the history department has been. I mean, I feel very lucky to have been in a department full of great friends and colleagues, but also great scholar teachers who have been role models for me in the 25 years I've been here. We're a department that talks as much about teaching as we talk about scholarship. We're a place where we read each other's work, we visit each other's classes. And I've been able to become the kind of historian that I am because the department has always supported wherever my interests took me, which were far from the field I was first hired to teach. So I've been able to just kind of be unfettered, I think, in my interests. And that wouldn't be true everywhere, but it is something that has happened in the history department for me. So I think my friends and colleagues and students in the department have played such an important role in making it possible for me to become somebody who could get a recognition like that. So I'm very aware of the how meaningful this recognition is, but also how important the context is that has shaped me to become the kind of historian that I am.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, this is an incredible honor. And I was completely shocked but delighted to find this out. The fact that Georgetown has so many amazing teachers, so many amazing scholars, like research is 100%, teaching is 100%, and that I could be considered to be nominated for this at all. I think, yeah, I'm just overwhelmed and very grateful.
Thank you. And Paul?
So first off, the nice little chunk of change to do research is pretty cool. So thank you for that. It takes a posse to do good research. It takes a posse to become a good teacher. So thank you also for honoring my posse, my family, my mom and dad. My mom taught the second grade for many years. She's a way better teacher than me. I'm just trying to be like her. My dad was an actor. That's an essential skill for teaching, right? And my students and my colleagues have been patient and kind and super supportive. So if I can live up to their investment in me and their confidence, I'm good. And this extraordinary honor makes me feel like maybe I'm on my way to doing that.
Thank you. And Paul, Rachel, Alison, and Ken, thank you for sharing your insights with us. We're so grateful for your contributions and your commitment to excellence as scholars and teachers. Congratulations again on this wonderful recognition of your accomplishments.